Oh, it's time. Going live. We are live. I think we're live. Yeah, I think we're live. I presume we're live. Morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
We have one empty window with Michelle not here yet. Good to see you all.
Hello, Cushion.
As you greeted me, happy Christmas.
Yeah. Absolutely. Happy Christmas. Pam, what do you make of the snow?
It's lovely to watch, but I should have been going out this morning and I've cancelled.
Yeah, okay. Safety first.
Yes.
And Chris, remind us what you're going to do today.
Well, I won't really be progressing jobs today. It's a bit tricky, but I've got some disposal work that I can do. So as much as I'm going to get wet and cold and stuff, it's just a good opportunity to still be kind of productive, you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Michelle, what are you going to do today?
Quite busy today, actually.
Are you
got
doing
meetings?
the lunch club today, aren't you?
Yeah, going into lunch club.
Tell David.
Although having just driven across the town to go and take the kids to school, you can't drive over 15 miles an hour.
Really?
Yeah. No, nothing is going over 15 miles an hour on the side roads. Main road isn't as well. Main road wouldn't be as bad, but obviously it's absolutely chocker. So you're not going over 15 miles an hour anywhere on the main roads. But yeah, they're horrible to drive on. Like there's no traction when you're trying to start from zero. And considering I drive an automatic, that makes it a little bit harder.
So I'm wondering, I've got a class this afternoon, and I'm just wondering.
It's supposed to rain this afternoon, Emily said.
Yeah, I heard
What
that.
time from?
I don't know, but Emily was very. It's Emily's birthday today.
Oh,
I
I've
know.
sent her a thing. What's it?
Need to drop a card round.
Oh. So yeah, she was very sad that it was going to be raining. She didn't mind the snow, but she wasn't that keen on the fact it was going to rain this afternoon.
I'll just send Emily a text. Because I forgot.
We're all prompted to do something for Emily.
Yeah, so we're online.
Yeah. Everybody, happy birthday to Emily.
Happy
Birthday, Emily.
She doesn't like me to watch it, but yeah.
Someone watches that.
How can she be 17?
Which is amazing.
What? I don't know.
It kind of comes after 16.
Yeah, but somebody will have been married 18 years come Sunday.
Oh yeah.
Golly
Yeah.
jeepers.
Shows how long we didn't wait.
Right,
Got
we
my
need to make a start,
Electric
guys.
blanket on today.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Electric blanket.
Yeah.
Man.
Proper toasty.
So at a certain point during the Bible study, Michelle's going to nod off and just slump into the chair.
I would never fall asleep on online Bible study.
Especially when I'm praying,
Especially not during the prayers. I would never do that, Andrew. I don't know what you're on about. Definitely didn't fall asleep last week during the prayers. If anyone fancies being entertained, just watch the last bit of the prayers from last week and you will see my head slowly drop that little bit.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't notice. You've been at work all the night before, so it's hardly surprising.
I was fine until I shut my eyes to pray.
We could turn it into a little kind of looping meme or something, couldn't we? Anyway, we're in chapter 7 of Esther.
We are.
It's quite a short chapter, so we may well just plough on straight into 8 as well, I wonder. In fact, should we just do that? Should we just do 7 and 8 and just do the whole thing?
What do you want to see how it goes?
That's okay. Okay, we'll just do 7 first, and I reckon we'll have time, but let's see. Pam, could you read the whole of 7 because it's only 10 verses?
Okie dokie.
And Michelle, could you pray for us?
Don't fall asleep in the middle as you play.
I'm all right today. It's fine. Excuse me. Let's pray. Father God, thank you for today. Thank you that we can study your word. Thank you for the snow and how beautiful it looks, and the way that it just makes everything look so pure and gorgeous. Lord, would you be with us today in our Bible study? Would you speak to each one of us? Would you help us to learn something new about who you are? And be with us this morning, Lord. Amen.
Amen. So Esther chapter 7. So the king and Haman. Have we decided on Haman or Haman?
I've always known it as Haman.
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 Start again. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. As they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then King Esther answered, if I have found favour with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed and annihilated. If we'd merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther said, an adversary and an enemy. This vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine and went out into the palace garden. But Haman realized that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace gardens to the banqueting hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Borna, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a pole reaching to the height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided.
Well,
Suffocate him first, then.
Okay. So let's get quickly into the scenario here. This is the second banquet, that's right?
Yeah.
Esther had already entertained them once.
Yeah.
Them into a place of receptivity.
Yeah.
Haman had thought that he was kind of in a position of favor. No, he realized that he was in danger now, didn't he? Because he had to parade Mordecai through the streets. That's right. So what do you make of this? What do you make of the petition that Queen Esther gives to the king?
How does the king not notice that it's the same wording? Like, it's his wording, it's his petition, it's his thing that he's put out in the first place, that the Jews should be destroyed, slaughtered and annihilated. And then he's like, oh, who would say that sort of thing? It's not very bright.
Although he may not have associated it with the queen, though. Because she said, my people, spare my life. And
What do you reckon it's a regular thing that he was doing then, slaughtering and annihilating people? We just don't know about the rest of them.
I can't believe it was that normal to do so. Again, it's not a great reflection on the king in terms of competency and character, is it? He doesn't seem to be very okay with his own decisions.
He's not right.
Yeah.
It's perhaps been a bit of time, and it's had at least a couple of banquets since he made the
True, and he's been to sleep, and he's had quite a lot of wine, hasn't he?
That's my excuse always when I've forgotten things. I've been to sleep since then.
Yeah.
It does strike me though. Sorry, go on, Pam.
Just that she talks about them being sold, and it hadn't occurred to me before about him promising money to the king, didn't he? In the
It was
first
right,
place, he
wasn't
said he would pay for the stuff to be done, and it hadn't occurred to me. In fact, the payment was refused, wasn't it? But he was still offering to sell them.
That's it.
But Queen Esther says, spare my life and my people's life. So she is now fully, she's got some skin in the game. You know, she's saying this is to do with me. She's now coming clean on being a Jew, and she's saying this petition is against me and my people. It's a little bit of an echo of Moses going to the Pharaoh and saying, let my people go. Yeah. It's an identification of these are my people, God's people. And that means that whatever happens is going to happen to the queen as well as to the people. So it heightens the risk for Esther to say this, I think. Yeah. She's not just a petition forward for some Jews, she's saying for we Jews. Yeah.
And King Xerxes sort of, he's not put it together at all in his head, has he? Because he'd forgotten that, not only has he forgotten petition, the what was the word, the edict, he's forgotten that it was Haman who said it.
Absolutely. I mean, how vague his brain is.
Yes, I know the feeling at the moment.
But even more shocking, the next bit, he gets up in a rage, he leaves his wine.
Yes, exactly.
Not like, forget about the food, he's leaving his wine.
But of course, the declaration of Esther, when the king says, who has done this? In my translation, it says a foe and enemy, this wicked Haman, or this vile Haman. And he's right there.
The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman.
Yeah.
So she set it up so that the man in question is right there.
It's an interesting one, that phrase, this vile Haman, because Esther's kind of like biting words are a kind of, if I can use a big word, Michelle, rhetorical counterpoint.
Oh.
Rhetorical. You only use big words if you explain them.
Ah, right. Okay. Well, this might explain it, what it is. Because Haman had that sneering kind of characterization of Mordecai when he said, "That's Jew Mordecai." So it's kind of like a flip of that, isn't it? You know.
Okay. So this is another great reversal, even in language.
Yeah. Yes.
Reversal of fortunes and a reversal of critique, if you like.
Yeah.
So the Jews are no longer the vile ones. Haman is the vile one.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that the king sort of, he seems to be just too angry to sit still. He's got to sort of move and
yeah,
pump it off. This king, he just seems a bit like a numpty, a bit, you know, must be like empty. He's like swayed by whatever. Do you know what I mean? He's not very wise or astute, but maybe that's what a lot of kings are. I don't know.
But again, a bit like what Chris had said previously, the kings of the earth are in the hands of God. You know, he's simply being used, if you like, and he's used by the enemy sometimes, but in this circumstance, he's used by God, and God's just prodding him to get him to do things there. Yeah,
I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Because even in the UK, like the king and queen, they like the queen before and the king now, I guess, they don't really make the laws. They just approve what the governments have said, and it's kind of similar in this situation, isn't it? In that the king in this situation, the law was made by the other people, and then he just like put his seal on it.
Maybe I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's probably true.
I think I was questioning actually how much I don't think it's totally fair to think that he was stupid. You know, how could he have not have known? Because sometimes people do things with such wrong motives, don't they? And disguise and things. Even the way it was all been written and everything, he didn't pick up on it, did he? I know
So
when
you think
Esther,
it may have felt it was a kind of subterfuge. It was to kind of get
Yeah.
Haman had tricked him into signing this thing.
I think so, possibly, partly. Yeah, he didn't really fully perhaps know what he was doing.
He's just
And
not
it
thought
wasn't
about the
freedom.
consequences, has he?
Okay.
Mm.
And then, of course, you have this emotional scene. It's almost like something out of a movie. Haman is kind of leaning on the couch of Queen Esther going, please save my life, just at the point at which the king walks back in, which enrages him even more. You know, like, you're threatening the queen in my presence, in my house. At which point, Arbona kicks in and takes him away. It says they covered his head. Does that mean they put a bag on his head? What's that meaning?
See, my Bible's got a bit about this. It says they covered Haman's face. A veil was placed over the face of someone condemned to death because Persian kings refused to look upon the face of a condemned person. So it's, yeah, because he's been condemned to death, then he's just has a veil placed over his face so that the king doesn't have to look at him.
Didn't they used to, this is completely different, but before, obviously in this country at one point, we did actually have a capital punishment, like with hanging. If I remember, the judge would put, it was the other way around, the judge would put something over his head, wouldn't he?
Yeah, there'd be a kind of a black cover that he put on top of his wig to condemn someone to death. But a hanged person in this country would probably have their head covered. Yes.
A black bag, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's to spare the viewers from what happens to the face when you're hanged, which is not pleasant. Just again, impaled or hanged, do we just not know?
Well, he was on a pole. How would he not be hanged? I mean,
It could be a pole with a gallows though, because mine says gallows.
it was a
Yeah,
very,
mine's
very
gallows.
One says pole.
what is wrong with there?
Does
it matter?
It doesn't. It
I
doesn't
just
matter.
don't like the idea of any
It's
of
going to
it.
be a natural
What you-
form of death, whichever, isn't it?
Oh, I'm glad it's, you know, I'm so glad. Well, maybe we are very sanitized in our culture. It just it's very hard. I mean, obviously there are other cultures where this wouldn't, you know, people do awful things still. I mean, if you think of gangs or places in other parts of the world that where horrible things still happen, don't they? Where you get still horrible deaths and things, but it just makes you quite horrible.
I mean, death's not a nice thing to watch either way, is it?
No.
Can I say something else about when Haman kind of like was sort of bowing down before Esther, I guess pleading for his life because he realized that his fate was already sealed in regard to the king. So that's all very ironic, isn't it? But oh gosh, this perhaps, remember when Mordecai wouldn't bow to Haman was sort of low sort of thing, and it does seem to be quite ironic that I've got a little in my notes here that says Haman, who became angry when the Jew Mordecai would not bow down, which sets the whole story in motion, now falls before the Jewess Esther. So it just seems to be an interesting thing there as well going on.
Really good observations, Chris. It sounds like, you know, there is an orchestration of a distinct and clear reversal of fortunes.
Yeah.
You know, wicked plan overturned by God saying, no, you bow to my people. You bow to the ones you condemn. Very good.
But that, in a way, that this should encourage us, shouldn't it? That, you know, when we say, some of the Psalms say, oh, is it, well, why do the wicked prosper? You know, when we often say, don't we? Why is it that bad things, where's the justice? You know, we often think about justice. And I'm hoping that this might actually help us to see that even though there is often injustice, we could see injustice and wickedness, that God ultimately will be just, and that if you go right forward to Revelation, where he'll put all things right, even though in this, the process might seem like that, and there might be awful things that happen in the process, but this God does prod different people.
I would probably have to sharpen that up and say God is faithful to his people.
Okay.
In all of this. So he will do justice to those who are his, because the only reason this happens is because it's the Jews.
Yeah.
Which does apply to God's chosen people now. There is a degree of protection. I don't think this is a guarantee of free from suffering, because that's certainly not what Jesus teaches. We are likely to suffer for him, but there are seasons of protection, and it will only go so far. I think there are things Jesus prophesies in the future about preserving us as far as is necessary. But yeah, God can sort things out. Anything else in chapter 7 before we read chapter 8?
Yeah, I've got something. The whole pole thing, we haven't really looked at him being impaled, but there's a quote by John Calvin I'd like to read.
Blimey, Chris is on a roll today.
You've been doing some proper research, Chris.
Oracle counterpoint, and now John Calvin.
I've been notes. So let me just read this. Impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. John Calvin said, "Man falls at God's providence, as God's providence ordains, but he falls by his own fault."
Right. Yeah.
Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, I get that. Yeah. Calvin very much wanted to raise up the significance of God's sovereign power over everything.
Yeah.
But still preserves the fact that it's just, and as a result of what human beings are doing.
That's a good way of explaining it. Yes.
It's complicated but true.
Mm.
The New Testament equivalent, which I may have mentioned before, is the crucifixion of Jesus was ordained by God, but done by the hands of Pilate and the Jewish leaders. And the Pilate and the Jewish leaders were responsible for the crucifixion, but God ordained it. Yeah? Serious but true. Okay, let's read on then. I just wonder, Michelle, could you read the first 8 verses of chapter 8?
I can.
And then could you read from verse 9 to the end?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so chapter 8. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. "If it pleases the king," she said, "and if he regards me with favour and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman the son of Hammedatha the Agagite devised, and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family?" King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, "Because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have hanged him on the gallows. Now write another decree in the king's name on behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked."
At once the royal secretaries were summoned on the 23rd day of the 3rd month, the month of Sivan. They wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Kush. These orders were written in the script of each province and the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality of province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. Oh, sorry. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honour. In every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating. And many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Wow. So we've now gone from simply the king's reaction with regards to Haman into the queen saying we need to sort the situation out. And she's very, very precise, isn't she, about what she's looking for? You know, she has to spell it out and gets it through if it pleases the king. What do you think?
I'm wondering if this is this better now for the Jews than even before? You know, so they went through this terrible turmoil, but then is it better now? I would hope so. I don't know. To study that. You know,
It's a good question. I mean, maybe the Jews were semi-invisible before. They were simply another crop of slaves in exile. But now they're named, and they're named with some level of recognition. So they've certainly got some standing that they didn't have before. What do you make of Esther's request to not only overturn the command, but to annihilate their enemies?
Just to confirm it, I was just checking back again. It is the same date that they've said for this to happen.
Oh, right. Yeah. So it is a complete reversal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah. So I mean, my New Living Translation puts a date on it that I understand, as opposed to the one that we don't get from the old times. So it's got March the 7th. So it's 2 days ago.
That was Purim.
Yeah. So March the 7th was the first one, and then when they do this new decree, it's the same date, March the 7th.
You may remember, I mean, this is going all the way back to Abrahamic promises, and certainly under the Mosaic law. Those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed. There does appear to be an implicit or even explicit protection on God's people, and a consequence on people in how they relate to God's people. So if you treat God's people well, you get blessed. If you treat God's people badly, you get cursed. This may fit into that category. I can't decide. I don't know how right or good this next action is on Esther's part.
All of this has only taken place over 2 months as well. So the other thing happened in April, and the new thing happened in June.
Right, so it's very rapid.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a translation but still, it's kind of that sort of timeline-ish.
It's very comprehensive as well, isn't it? Because it says 127 provinces. So this is a big area, provinces from India to Ethiopia, where they had it all written out in their own languages. So this is a very large area. The presumption being that Jews were scattered all over the place. You know, they must have been dispersed throughout all of these different provinces. Otherwise, why write to all of them?
Yeah, in the further on in later chapters, it numbers how many people there were. So perhaps wait till we get there. But yeah, there's a lot of them.
But that's why they have to use the fastest horses.
Yeah.
Got all the king's horses and all the king's men.
Yes, that's right.
They're putting Humpty together again.
And it's not that the Jews are just able to assemble and protect themselves, but if anyone attacks them, they can annihilate them and plunder their property.
You know, the last decree that Haman got in the first place, was that sealed with the signet ring and stuff?
I think so.
Oh, I guess so.
I think so, yes.
I'm just wondering if that's the difference between each one, because he's saying, you know, you can't go against what the king says and what the king's seal says.
No, it does say in chapter 3, verse 12, sealed with the king's ring.
Okay, so it does. So he's literally
I mean, it
given
does-
two different things that go against each other and sealed his thing on both of them.
No, I mean, it does make you realize that when he says these things can't be changed, clearly they can. You know, clearly they can. But again, it's another explicit reversal. It's a turnaround. I'm
If
personally
it didn't have that seal, then it wouldn't have that same authority, though, would it?
absolutely. It is definitely a formal royal approval, so it's going to happen. I can't get my head around why it was necessary to annihilate or threaten to annihilate the enemies of the Jews. Why?
Save them from further attack later on.
It gives them an equal position, though, doesn't it? Because the original one said about annihilating the Jews.
Yeah,
And so if they're, so it's literally exactly the same wording. It's to kill, destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews, is what it says in 3.
Yeah.
And then this in chapter 8 says to kill. Where's it gone? I've lost it. There. Destroy, kill, and annihilate any armed force or nationality. So it's just giving equal rights to both of them effectively.
and I do suppose it, you know, it is measured. It says any armed force of any people that might attack them. So I suppose it's not just a massacre, it's in defense, isn't it?
Yeah, it's given an
Yes,
equal
yes.
position, because they wouldn't have been in equal position, would they, if they're all slaves and stuff?
I have a real problem with this. I struggle with it all, especially because obviously now we see the situation in Israel at the minute where there's, you know, we see
Present day
stuff, and I'm thinking, I struggle with it because obviously this isn't God telling them to do this, is it? This is like a.
So God, so you're saying God didn't inspire Esther with this command?
I don't know.
I mean, I think it is definitely a sign of God's protection that the threat to the Jews is overturned and their safety is procured. The question that you seem to be raising, that I'm carrying, is do they go too far with it, or are they just in saying we can annihilate our enemies?
It just feels really hard. It's a bit like we've just been reading, we're going through Genesis. We've just read in Genesis, I can't remember which chapter we've just been doing, where there's a situation. Is it Dinah, who's the sister of of Jacob's sons? She's one of the girls. There's 12 sons, but there is a sister called Dinah who basically gets
Chapter 34 of Genesis.
She gets raped and she gets attacked by this particular chap, and they basically want to, you know, they hate it because she's been dishonored, and their response is to not only destroy the person who did it, but to destroy the whole of the village, isn't it? That it's
Yeah.
like the whole
They-
of that town.
the children of Jacob trick the men of this tribe and say, you need to be, if you want to marry Dinah and intermarry, then you need to be circumcised so that you can do that. They wait till the men have just been circumcised, which means they're disabled for a few days, then they go in and they kill all the men. And it's an example of exaggerated retribution. It's where one person has been harmed. For that one person, 100 people get killed.
So-
It's unequal.
So
But I don't
when
think that is this, because I think that this is giving equal. It's giving the same. If it fell short of equal, then it wouldn't give the Jews the same protection and the same place to be able to defend themselves. So I don't think that it's going further than the others have got, because the annihilation is on both sides. They've both been given, like, told to go and annihilate. They've both been told to do. It's literally exactly the same wording. So I don't think that it goes further. I think it just puts them on an equal footing, because anything less than that would put them at a disadvantage.
And isn't that why we've got an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth?
that's what I'm thinking, because the law of Moses. I mean, we often go, well, doesn't the Bible say this? Isn't that really awful? I thought the law of Moses initially was to stop that sense of, you've had my chicken, I'll burn your house down. It's a bit like a limiting retribution.
Yeah, limited vengeance.
But why is it then? Is this, if you go, I've gone on to chapter 9. But if you think about when Jesus comes and he talks about, you have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you. So he has a completely different way. So how does that relate to this passage, which is, even if it is equal retribution, well, in the New Testament, on the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives a completely different way of seeing.
But
So-
Jesus ups the ante on everything that he says in the Sermon on the Mount. Like, Jesus puts in a higher level on absolutely every command he says. This is prior to that.
Yes, and that's where you can talk about different dispensations, different phases of God's plan being worked out. And you could argue at this point, God is still establishing his people in a land. He needs to establish them back in the land to then be his representatives properly. So it's not quite fully worked out as when Jesus arrived. I think it's a legitimate question. I think it's a legitimate question that how this decree is formed is not fully in line with what Jesus eventually says, because it isn't, is it? Not. It's not the full revelation of God. It's simply the defense of the Jewish people at this point.
And equally, Esther isn't Jesus and isn't God.
That's right. Esther isn't. That's right. It's simply the defense of the Jews at this point.
What about the sort of spiritual side of it, though, where it's a satanic thing that was trying to, wipe out the Jews. Going back to Joshua and Jericho, that city was a key strategic city. I think they were really into all sorts of pagan things. They worshipped the moon god and everything, and that was it was a spiritual thing. That every bit of it had to be annihilated, wiped out. And this is a thing that's going to protect the Jews, I suppose, spiritually as well, isn't it? Because the satanic force had tried to wipe them out. Just throw that out.
I think there is an aspect to that, Chris, that is absolutely true. The complexity in it is to do with supposed innocent victims, and I know we can't measure that, we can't calculate that, and sometimes that's a straw man argument. It's an empty argument because we don't know what the real spiritual nature of these places or provinces were like. We don't know how wicked they were. And we do know in Old Testament times, God had to remove enemies. There's that famous quote all the way back to Abraham. When God is speaking to Abraham about his descendants, he tells Abraham, you'll be in a foreign land for 400 years, meaning Egypt. And he says, but that you can't get the promised land until until the time of the Ammonites the wickedness of the Ammonites has come to its fullness. In other words, God is waiting for 400 years before he finally punishes the nations in Canaan when the Jews take the land. God is patient for hundreds of years with wicked nations before he punishes them. So it's not kind of like just a whim. The removal of wicked people in God's timing is usually very, very measured. It just feels like there could be some innocent victims. I don't know. Maybe they're not.
But in verse 17, many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. So a way of evangelism.
Well, that's an interesting take. Yes, and I mean, again, you could say there is a parallel with Acts, where the reputation of the early church was so high that there was people coming to faith, and even a reverencing of the early church. It said there was a kind of an awe or a fear. When who's the couple who died?
Ananias and
When
Sapphira.
Ananias and Sapphira were killed and they were removed, there was a fear that rested on the people then, because it's like, oh my gosh, God's people, almost like stand back. So there is something about this that is missionary, I guess. It reveals God.
Well, it does say, doesn't it? The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom. So in some ways, I do wonder in the last few years, maybe we've lost that fear of the Lord, not a fear of his badness or that he's some sort of tyrant king, but because of his goodness. Do you know what I mean? It's the other way around. It's a fear of something that you realise is really good, a natural awe and worship, and the realisation, oh gosh, we're not like that. Do you know what I mean? And that sense of fear of God actually does two things. You either reject it or you fall on your feet or you fall on your face. So
yeah, the fear of the Lord. When Elijah is on the mountain with the priests of Baal, and he is facing down enemies of God who are promoting false beliefs and worshipping false idols, and he puts that challenge before them. Who is God? Is it the Lord or is it Baal? And the fire falls on Elijah's offering, and everyone goes, the Lord is God, the Lord is God, and the priests of Baal are killed. In other words, there's a removal of what is wicked because they recognize God is Lord. So sometimes we have to kind of reach these sharper points because we don't know until something happens. Very interesting.
I do, and I ask the question of myself, and that do we sometimes not see what is wicked in things? We can't see. It's like we're, especially in our own culture, you just accept things because you're brought up in it. You can't necessarily see your own, what God maybe can see as well.
Yeah. What
does he see? And I think it's getting God's perspective on things rather than just my own as well. I think that's what I'm learning. Is like, Lord, how do I see like you see? I think that's my prayer a lot.
If you think about it as well, just to kind of sharpen it up right to the end, in the Second World War, well, before the Second World War, during the German submission to Hitler and the Nazi regime, the gradual dehumanization of the Jews was calculated using propaganda. So there was an increasing sense of they are vermin, they are manipulative, they are after your money, they are cruel, they are entirely self-interested. And there was a gradual increasing prejudice in ordinary German people against ordinary Jewish people because they believed lies about the Jews, and consequently they would happily put a star on their shoulder and paint paint on their windows and dispossess them and kick them out. And eventually they would get sent to camps because they were dehumanized. And therefore it persuaded the Jewish nation that that was okay.
The German.
Sorry, the German nation, that was an okay thing to do. And in this story, we have a reversal saying, you have seen these people wrong. The Jews are God's people. You're not going to do that. But we see in the last century, the Jewish nation, they got massacred. They absolutely did. We need to see evil for what it is. But you're right. You can be seduced into believing something that is wicked is okay. It's true. Any final points, guys? Because we've reached our 3/4 of an hour.
I think it's good that Mordecai, how it all turned around, even just for him, his own personal life. He got all of Haman's estate, who was rich beyond whatever. Parallel of Joseph there with the royal robes and the ring and everything. I think it's amazing.
Excellent. Very good.
Yeah.
God is sovereign. God can turn it all around. Yeah. Any other thoughts from anybody else? Okay. Pam, do you want to pray for us as we finish then?
Okay. Father God, thank you that we can always turn to you to know what is right and what's wrong. And fill us with the fear of you, the awe of you, not to be frightened, but just to realize just how great and wonderful and powerful you are, and that your way is always the right way. So as we go into our daily lives, Lord, help us to look for your way in everything that we're doing, and help us to stand up for the right way of being, so that we can represent you in our daily lives. So thank you for the pretty weather, Lord, and keep us all safe. Help us to make wise decisions about going out or not. And just be with us, Lord. And Lord, know who you are, but you know what I mean. So I'm going off into one of my daft ones. Thanks very much, Lord, and God bless.
I love the way you riff at the end of prayers, Pam. It's great. Okay, we're going to say goodbye for now, folks. Okay.
God bless.
Stay safe, everyone.